All right, guys, welcome back to Audio Booklet, and buckle up because today's topic is going to ruffle some feathers. I'm talking about why every broke guy should seriously consider dating a rich woman. Now, hold on, before you start typing angry comments about gold digging or whatever. Just hear me out for the full video, because I'm about to tell you a story that completely changed how I think about money, success, and relationships. This isn't some pickup artist nonsense or some scheme to use women for money. This is about something way deeper, way more transformational than that. I'm talking about how dating someone who's already financially successful can literally rewire your brain for wealth in ways that no business course, no motivational video, no self-help book ever could. So let me tell you about my friend Marcus. Real name, real story, and honestly, it's gonna blow your mind. 3 years ago, Marcus was broke as hell. I'm talking living paycheck to paycheck, driving a beat-up Honda Civic with a broken air conditioner, eating ramen noodles for dinner most nights. Today, the guy's pulling in 6 figures, owns 2 businesses, and just bought a house in one of the nicest neighborhoods in our city. What changed? He started dating Sarah, a woman who was already making serious money as a corporate lawyer. And no, she didn't just hand him cash or pay his bills. What happened was so much more profound than that. She accidentally gave him something way more valuable than money. She gave him a wealthy person's mindset. Let me paint you a picture of where Marcus was before he met Sarah. This dude was 28 years old, working at a call center, making barely above minimum wage. He had big dreams, sure, always talking about starting his own business, always watching those entrepreneur YouTube channels, always saying he was going to make it big someday. But here's the thing, and maybe you can relate to this. Marcus had what I call broke person energy. You know what I'm talking about? That constant stress about money, always checking his bank account before buying anything, making decisions based on what he couldn't afford rather than what was possible. His dating life reflected this mindset too. He'd take girls to cheap restaurants, always worried about splitting the bill, never feeling confident enough to approach women who seemed, well, out of his league. He had convinced himself that successful women wouldn't be interested in a guy like him. Classic self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I remember one night we were hanging out and he showed me his dating app matches. All the women were in similar financial situations to him. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but Marcus would always complain about how these relationships never seemed to push him to be better. They'd watch Netflix, eat fast food, talk about bills and stress. It was like a poverty echo chamber. He used to say things like, rich girls are high maintenance, or they only date guys who already have money, or I need to get my life together before I can attract someone successful. Sound familiar? Yeah, I thought so. These are the exact thought patterns that keep broke guys broke. The crazy part is that Marcus was actually a smart, funny, genuinely good guy. He just had this invisible ceiling in his mind about what he deserved and what was possible for him. And that ceiling wasn't just about money, it was about everything. The quality of people he surrounded himself with, the opportunities he thought he could pursue, the version of himself he believed he could become. So here's how everything changed. Marcus had this cousin who was getting married, right? Big fancy wedding at some upscale venue. Marcus almost didn't go because he was stressing about having to rent a tux and buy a wedding gift he couldn't really afford. But his mom basically forced him to go because it was family. He shows up to this wedding feeling completely out of place. Everyone there seemed more confident, better dressed, talking about vacations and investments and business deals. Marcus told me later he spent the first hour just trying to blend into the background, nursing the same drink, and wondering when he could politely leave. That's when he bumped into Sarah. Literally bumped into her by the bar. She was reaching for a drink at the same time he was, and they collided. Classic meet cute, except Marcus was so intimidated he almost just walked away after apologizing. But here's what's interesting. Sarah started the conversation. She was friendly, asked him how he knew the bride, started talking about how beautiful the venue was. Normal small talk, but Marcus said something about her energy was different. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, wasn't name-dropping or showing off. She just seemed comfortable in her own skin, comfortable in this environment that had Marcus feeling like a fish out of water. They talked for maybe 20 minutes. Nothing deep, nothing romantic yet, just conversation. But Marcus told me that during those 20 minutes, Sarah casually mentioned traveling to 3 different countries for work that year, talked about a real estate investment she was considering, and referenced some business conference she'd attended. Not bragging, just normal conversation for her. And here's the kicker, she seemed genuinely interested in what Marcus had to say, asked him about his job, his hobbies, his thoughts on things, made him feel heard in a way he wasn't used to. When she had to leave to catch up with other guests, she gave him her number and said they should grab coffee sometime. Marcus walked away from that conversation feeling something he hadn't felt in years: possibility. Not just romantic possibility, but possibility in general. Like maybe there was more available to him than he'd been thinking. Their first date was, well, let's just say it was a wake-up call for Marcus. Sarah suggested they meet at this coffee shop in the financial district. Nothing crazy expensive, but definitely a step up from the chain places Marcus usually frequented. The kind of place where people were having business meetings and discussing deals. Marcus showed up 15 minutes early, as usual, because that's what broke people do. We always assume we need extra time to figure out parking or find the place. Sarah showed up exactly on time, looking effortlessly put together in a way that Marcus said made his Walmart button-down feel inadequate. But here's where it gets interesting. During their conversation, Sarah started talking about her day. She'd had a meeting with a potential client about a merger worth several $1,000,000. To her, this was just Tuesday. To Marcus, it was like hearing about life on another planet. She wasn't trying to impress him or make him feel small. In fact, she seemed almost apologetic about having to take a work call during their coffee. But Marcus realized something that hit him like a ton of bricks. This woman operated in a world where $1,000,000 deals were normal Tuesday meetings. Her baseline for what was possible was completely different from his. When she asked about his work, Marcus felt embarrassed to talk about his call center job. But Sarah listened with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions, even suggested some ways he could potentially leverage his customer service skills into something bigger. She didn't make him feel judged or inferior. If anything, she seemed to see potential in him that he didn't see in himself. Their second date was even more eye-opening. Sarah suggested they go to this restaurant Marcus had driven past 100 times but never imagined actually eating at. The kind of place where the menu doesn't have prices and the waiter explains each dish like it's a work of art. Marcus was internally freaking out about the cost, but Sarah just ordered what she wanted. Not recklessly, not showing off, just comfortably. She was experiencing life at a level that Marcus had convinced himself was only for other people, and she was treating him like he belonged there too. During dinner, she talked about her investment portfolio, her retirement planning, her 5-year business goals. Again, not bragging, just normal conversation for someone who thought strategically about money instead of just surviving paycheck to paycheck. But here's what really got to Marcus. Sarah started asking him about his goals, his dreams, his long-term plans, and when he gave his usual vague answers about maybe starting a business someday or hoping things get better, she didn't just nod politely. She started asking follow-up questions. What kind of business? What was stopping him? Had he done any market research? Did he have a timeline? Nobody had ever asked Marcus these questions before. His friends and previous girlfriends would just nod along when he talked about his dreams, but they never pushed him to get specific or think strategically. Sarah's questions weren't judgmental, but they were challenging, in a good way. By their 3rd month of dating, Marcus started noticing changes in himself that had nothing to do with Sarah giving him money or paying for things, because she wasn't doing that. They were splitting bills, taking turns, planning dates, keeping things financially equitable, but something deeper was happening. First thing Marcus noticed was how he started thinking about time. Sarah would talk about her schedule in terms of hourly rates and opportunity costs. If she spent an evening watching TV, she was consciously choosing relaxation over work or side projects. If she took on a new project, she calculated not just the immediate payoff, but the long-term career implications. Marcus realized he'd been treating time like it was infinite and worthless. He'd spend hours scrolling social media, playing video games, watching random YouTube videos. Not necessarily bad activities, but he'd never thought about the opportunity cost. Sarah didn't lecture him about this, she just lived differently. And being around her made him more aware of how he was spending his most valuable resource. The second shift was around problem solving. When Marcus would complain about work stress or money problems, his usual approach was to vent and hope things got better. Sarah would listen, but then she'd start asking strategic questions. Have you talked to your manager about opportunities for advancement? Have you looked into what skills are in demand in your industry? What would it take to increase your income by 20% this year? Again, she wasn't being pushy or judgmental. She was just naturally solution-oriented in a way that Marcus wasn't used to. Wealthy people, he realized, don't just accept problems, they actively work to solve them or find ways around them. The third major shift was around his social circle. Sarah would invite Marcus to networking events, work parties, dinners with her successful friends. At first, Marcus felt like he didn't belong, but Sarah would include him in conversations, introduce him in ways that highlighted his strengths, and somehow make him feel like an equal, even when he was clearly the least successful person in the room. These events were like masterclasses in how successful people think and communicate. Marcus started picking up on patterns, how they talked about failures as learning experiences, how they discussed money as a tool rather than a source of stress, how they seemed to assume that problems had solutions rather than just accepting difficult circumstances. But here's the most important shift. Marcus started believing he could become one of these people. Not because Sarah was supporting him financially, but because she treated him like someone who was capable of success. She'd ask for his opinion on her business decisions. She'd brainstorm with him about his ideas. She made him feel like his thoughts and perspectives had value. This might sound cheesy, but Marcus told me that dating Sarah was like getting a glimpse into a parallel universe where he was successful and confident. And once he could see that version of himself, he started figuring out how to become that person. About 6 months into their relationship, the practical benefits started kicking in. And I want to be clear here, this wasn't Sarah doing favors for Marcus or pulling strings. It was more about access and exposure to a world that Marcus had never been part of. Sarah's friend group included entrepreneurs, executives, investors, and other high earners. When Marcus would join their social gatherings, he'd overhear conversations about business opportunities, market trends, investment strategies, information that most people pay thousands of dollars for in courses and seminars he was getting just by being present. One evening, they were at a dinner party, and Sarah's friend mentioned that her company was looking for someone to help with their customer service training. Just casual conversation, not even a formal job posting. Marcus mentioned his call center experience and how he'd actually developed some ideas for improving customer retention. Long story short, that casual conversation turned into a consulting gig that paid Marcus more in 3 months than his regular job paid in 6. But the real value wasn't just the money, it was learning how business actually works at a higher level. How successful people identify opportunities, how they position themselves, how they deliver value that goes beyond just showing up and doing the minimum required. Marcus started noticing that in Sarah's circle, everyone was always working on something beyond their main job. Side businesses, investment properties, consulting work, creative projects that could become income streams. The concept of multiple income sources wasn't just some internet marketing fantasy, it was standard operating procedure. Sarah herself was a perfect example. Her law career was successful, but she was also investing in real estate, had started a legal consulting practice on the side, and was even exploring getting into some cryptocurrency investments. She wasn't scattered or overwhelmed, she was strategic about building wealth from multiple angles. This was completely different from Marcus's previous worldview, where you had one job, you worked that job until retirement, and you hoped it would somehow be enough. Being around Sarah showed him that wealthy people don't rely on single income sources. They build systems. The networking wasn't just about business either. Sarah introduced Marcus to people who became genuine friends and mentors, successful people who were willing to share advice, make introductions, and sometimes even invest in or partner on projects. Marcus's social circle went from people who complained about money to people who actively worked to make more of it. And here's something interesting. Marcus started noticing how differently he was treated in professional settings when Sarah was with him. Waiters at nice restaurants assumed he belonged there. Business contacts took him more seriously. Even his confidence in these situations improved because he was being treated like someone who mattered. I'm not saying this was fair or right, but it's reality. When you're seen with successful people, others assume you're successful too. And sometimes that assumption becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because it opens doors that wouldn't otherwise be available. By the 1-year mark, Marcus was a completely different person. Not because Sarah had changed him directly, but because exposure to wealth mindset had rewired his brain in fundamental ways. The biggest shift was moving from scarcity thinking to abundance thinking. Marcus used to make decisions based on what he couldn't afford or what might go wrong. Sarah made decisions based on potential upside and calculated risks. She'd spend money on things that could generate more money: courses, networking events, better equipment for her side business, investments that might take years to pay off. Marcus started applying this same thinking to his own life. Instead of seeing a $500 course as an expense he couldn't afford, he started seeing it as an investment that could potentially increase his income by thousands. Instead of avoiding networking events because of the cost, he started viewing them as opportunities to meet people who could change his life. The second major shift was around delayed gratification. Sarah would regularly pass up immediate pleasures in favor of long-term gains. She'd work late on a project that wouldn't pay off for months. She'd save money that could have been spent on vacation to invest in property. She'd spend weekends researching investment opportunities instead of just relaxing. Marcus realized that broke people, himself included, tend to prioritize immediate comfort over long-term wealth. We'll spend money we don't have on things that make us feel better right now, even if it hurts us financially in the long run. Wealthy people do the opposite. They'll sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term security and growth. The third shift was probably the most important. Marcus started thinking systematically instead of just reactively. When Sarah approached any goal, she'd break it down into specific steps, create timelines, identify potential obstacles and solutions. She treated wealth building like a project that could be planned and executed. Marcus had always thought rich people just got lucky or had some secret knowledge, but watching Sarah operate day after day, he realized that wealth is mostly about consistent application of proven principles. Budget more than you spend, invest the difference, continuously develop valuable skills, build relationships with other successful people, find ways to create value for others. It's not complicated, but it requires discipline and strategic thinking. The fourth shift was around personal development. Sarah was constantly reading business books, listening to podcasts, attending seminars, hiring coaches. She treated learning like a necessity, not a luxury. Marcus started doing the same, and his growth accelerated dramatically. But here's the most profound change. Marcus started believing he deserved success. Broke people often have this underlying belief that they don't deserve wealth, that rich people are somehow different or special. Being with Sarah, seeing how normal and human she was, helped Marcus realize that successful people aren't superhumans, they just think and act differently. Sarah didn't have some magical talent that Marcus lacked. She wasn't smarter or more special. She just learned certain principles and applied them consistently, and if she could do it, so could he. Fast forward to today, and Marcus's transformation is honestly incredible. He left the call center job about 18 months ago and now runs two businesses. One is that customer service consulting company that grew out of his first networking connection. The other is a digital marketing agency he started after taking some online courses and applying what he learned. His total income last year was over 6 figures. He just bought that house I mentioned earlier. He's got a solid investment portfolio, including some real estate. More importantly, he thinks and acts like a successful person now. He makes decisions based on long-term strategy rather than short-term survival. But here's what's really interesting. Marcus and Sarah are still together, and their relationship is stronger than ever. They're true partners now, both contributing financially and supporting each other's goals. Marcus isn't dependent on Sarah anymore, but he's deeply grateful for how she transformed his understanding of what was possible. Sarah told me recently that she's proud of Marcus's growth, but she also learned things from him. His customer service background helped her improve how she communicates with clients. His natural creativity brought fresh perspectives to some of her business challenges. It became a true partnership where both people brought value to the table. And here's the kicker. Marcus now does the same thing for other people that Sarah did for him. He hires people from backgrounds similar to his old situation and mentors them. He shares opportunities with friends who are still struggling. He's become part of that network of successful people who lift others up. The lesson here isn't that you should use women for money or try to date someone just because they're wealthy. The lesson is that surrounding yourself with people who operate at a higher level will naturally elevate your own thinking and behavior. If all your friends are broke, you'll probably stay broke because that becomes your normal. If your social circle includes successful people, you'll start thinking and acting like success is normal for you too. Marcus's story proves that the right relationship can be the catalyst for complete life transformation. Not because someone rescues you, but because they show you what's possible and treat you like you're capable of achieving it. So guys, don't let your ego or fear of judgment keep you from pursuing women who are more successful than you currently are. The right partnership could be exactly what you need to unlock your full potential. Sometimes the best investment you can make isn't in stocks or real estate, it's in surrounding yourself with people who see greatness in you before you see it in yourself. That's the uncomfortable truth about dating successful women. It's not about the money, it's about the mindset. And that mindset shift could literally change everything about your life. All right, guys, that's Marcus's story, and honestly, it's one of the most inspiring transformations I've ever witnessed. Let me know in the comments what you think about this perspective, and if you've had similar experiences, I'd love to hear about them. Until next time, remember, you become who you surround yourself with. Choose wisely.